Good afternoon, good morning, everyone, or good evening. I'm very happy to be here today. As Judy said, we will present you the PSA solution that was co-developed with IBM. Before we do this, we'll go a bit into where Sigfox stands within the supply chain environment. And as Judith said, if you have any questions or remarks, please fill them in. We'll look at them at the end of the presentation. Okay, so first of all, looking at taking a step back from the technology itself and looking into the supply chain environment and what today is driving the different stakeholders in the supply chain ecosystem. So today we are looking towards more and more integrated supply chain ecosystem. Integrated in the sense that an actor such as a manufacturer, which is producing goods, will be in the end extremely dependent on the efficiency of the stakeholders along its supply chain. His ability to produce on time will be dependent on his supplier's ability to deliver him raw goods. His ability to sell his product through the distribution networks and the point of sales will also depend on the ability of his partners to do so. So in the end, not one actor has the full control on this chain, and therefore it is becoming more and more a requirement to gain visibility on that ecosystem. Visibility in order to identify the pain points that are arising, the inefficiencies, and tackle them. And this is where IoT really comes into handy and really is showing its true power, is when companies look to implement optimizations, look to create new value outside of the boundaries of their own structures. The traditional way of supply chain management when looking to make improvements is to take a deep dive in the current processes, identify the inefficiencies, and work together internally to solve those inefficiencies. And now the question that rises once you need to go beyond your organization is how to get that first layer of information. How do you know that within your supplier, within your distribution network, within your point of sale, you actually have an efficiency? You know you have a pain point because your business is suffering, because you're late on deliverings and so on, but you do not know where exactly that pain is originating. And this is where the IoT comes in handy, with the ability to generate a first insight, a first level of information, a visibility to pave the way towards an improvement in the supply chain. And as you can see, this is what our customers so far have been looking towards to. Either it's from PSA side looking to improve their inbound logistics, Airbus as well, or on the outbound logistics side, where we've worked very closely with Michelin, where we've tracked maritime containers shipments, and we are looking in the next month or even weeks to unveil a new big projects where we've worked with a blue chip supply chain company who has been looking to improve the flows of their assets from the distribution point. So you can see Sigfox has really the ability to accompany you all along the different steps of the supply chain. Now, what really makes Sigfox relevant in those applications, beyond the total cost of ownership and the energy efficiencies that are linked to the low power wide area technologies? Well, first of all, it's the one global and ubiquitous network. Today, assets can be followed through 60 countries, and we can provide a global contracts. As a company, the last thing you want to focus on is, where is my asset going to go? You're a worldwide company, you're shipping across multiple countries. You need to have the ability, you need to have a solution that can accompany you across all those different countries. The independent flow of information. Today, when one of our solutions sends a message, it is captured by our network and it is made available through an API accessible to our customers. And this system really enables our customers to avoid any complicated integration. And this, for example, on several projects has allowed us to speed up the initial deployments by avoiding any complicated integration with legacy or critical systems. The fact that the information is real-time. Once a sensor has detected an event, the information will be collected and will be sent to the network. And within seconds, that information will be available on the cloud and on the API that I was talking about. And in a very fast-moving environment, that ability to get the information, to get the alerts real time, is allowing our customers to react accordingly. If you have an alert on one of your shipments, but you only get that alert after 2 or 5 days, you will have limited room to interact. A strong and wide ecosystem. We will see later on through the PSA use case how this can be helpful. Today around Sigfox, Sigfox is just a component, it's a brick of the full solutions, and today we have around us a lot of amazing companies, a lot of amazing partners that are really working hard on their specific core competence. And today we have in our ecosystems specialized device maker around the supply chain, specialized consulting firms, and so on. And so Sigfox is really the trigger to launch an IoT solution. But with that trigger, we are bringing a full ecosystem that is knowledgeable on the matter. No invasive infrastructure. Sigfox is infrastructureless in the sense that the sensors are running on batteries, and therefore it avoids pulling any specific cables in sensitive and complex environments. Supply chain environments are highly scripted, in order to gain the maximum efficiencies. But when you take an existing script and you try to add a line into it, it can be very complex. We are removing the complexity of pulling any cables and so on, and therefore increasing our ability to deploy the solution on the field. And last but not least, devices operate on their own. A good IoT device is a device you can roll out on the field and forget for a couple of years. And this ability allows the solution to really get the information first-handed. There is no discrepancy, there is no human error in getting the information. The sensor will detect a situation and it will send the information. And like I was saying earlier, having that information, having that raw data of what is happening on the field is the first step of understanding how you can make improvements on your supply chain. Where is the inefficiency and how is it impacting your business? Now let's look at a concrete example of how Sigfox really enabled PSA to deploy such a solution. So before we go into the solution and the why and the how and the what, now let's provide a bit of context on the PSA situation. So the solution we have deployed is a track and trace solution that has been implemented on returnable containers. So today, car makers such as PSA are relying on millions of returnable containers that are used to transport parts between their top suppliers and their assembly lines. You have to keep in mind that a car maker has more a role of integrator than actually maker. In some cases, the car maker will only produce 30% of the car. The rest of the subsystems will come from tier 1 suppliers. And therefore, it is critical that those containers and those parts arrive on time at the assembly lines. Because car maker assembly lines are extremely well organized, and they have the ability to produce at a very high speed. You can find assembly lines producing up to a car per minute. And those assembly lines are following, do not want to hold too many stocks. So it is really critical that those containers arrive on time to not disturb the production line. As the head of the production line from PSA, the last thing you want to have is a conversation on why you had to stop the production line because the containers didn't make it in time. It's the last thing you want to do. Those containers are bought and owned by the car makers. And of course, like I said earlier, they're loaded by the tier ones. To give you a bit of scope on the project, so today those packaging are used across 20 different PSA sites and across 2,000 supplier sites. You can see on the map the spread of the different assembly lines and the spread of the different suppliers. So when working with PSA, one of the core questions was, okay, how do we put in place a solution that potentially could reach all of that installed base of assembly sites and supplier sites? And why? Okay, so why would PSA want to track those containers? Well, there are three main critical challenges today around the usage of those returnable containers. The first one is, like I said earlier, guaranteeing the availability of those containers. A recent study has shown that this is really a key concern to the supply chain managers, the logistics managers within car makers, is making sure that those containers are available to avoid disrupting the main activities. And this assumption is right for the automotive industry, but you will also find it in a lot of other industries. Once you apply lean management, lean supply chain principles, where you avoid large stocks, guaranteeing the availability of your parts to run your production line is critical. The second big challenge is the loss rate. In average, study has shown that 10% of the fleet is lost every year. And it can even go up to 15-20% in some situations. If you take a container that can be worth between 300 and 800 euros, this represents a huge financial burden. And last but not least, the cost of handling that packaging. Studies have shown that the cost of handling that packaging can actually be 8 times the cost of the packaging over its lifetime. So taking an example, you buy packaging for 100 euro. In cost of handling, you will actually spend the equivalent of 800 euros. Now, cost of handling are a bit are hidden costs, let's say. They can be distribution costs, they can be claim management costs, and so on. So they are quite complex to identify, but in the end, there's a lot of operational power, a lot of operational activities that is injected into managing that fleet, and therefore generating costs. And that is why PSA really launched and decided to work in implementing an IoT solution. And they've done that by implementing 3 governing KPIs, 3 core KPIs that they would follow from day one to the deployment of the project. The first one is reducing the amount of lost containers. The second one is dividing by 2 their CapEx associated with that fleet and reducing by 30% the OpEx associated with that fleet. And last but not least, improving the litigation management. If you have today, given the installed base of suppliers, 2,000, you can imagine the amount of calls and papers, the interactions between the car maker and the suppliers can generate. If a container has gone missing, if they're late, if it's not enough, and so on. And the idea is really to use that IoT solution to also reduce the operational burden associated. Now, how would they do this? So the three first initial focus were the following. First of all, having the ability to monitor the distribution of the fleet, both within PSA grounds and at their supplier sites. Monitoring the status of the container, so knowing exactly where it is inside the factory, if it's still in transit or if it's within the supplier. And getting the alerts, getting events information based on if the container is on time, if the container has been delayed, if it's off tracks, or if it's lost. So these are the three main core applications that were initially requested by PSA through this project. Now the question you asked me is, how did this project come to life? How did we go to a full-blown solution on such a critical part of PSA's operational business? The starting point of that project is very important, and it gives also us best practices on how to be successful in deploying an IoT project. The real starting point of this project was a 2 days design thinking that involved a large scope of experts within PSA and within IBM. And this is really important. It shows also that to really success in deploying such a solution, you need to onboard the different aspects of your company. In this case, we had an executive sponsor, we had a trusted third party, the IT department was involved, the project manager through the innovation department. We had also an operational expert and procurement. And it's important to have all those people in the same room to get really the full picture on the pain points, because they knew that they had an issue with those containers, but moving from that issue to the solution takes a lot of expertise. And what IBM did, what we did with IBM, is through those 2 days, put all that expertise in a room and work together on generating what would be the best minimum viable product that we could put on the field quite rapidly to get first results and understand how IoT could solve that specific issue. Of course, it's only 2 days, and after those 2 days were followed by 18 months of close collaboration to really tailor a solution to the needs of PSA. And you can see here a quick timeline what the main parts are indicated, to give you a bit of a flavor of the different aspects we had to go through. Of course, after the design thinking workshop, looking to how we could generate that first MVP, getting a device off the shelf to cut down on the design, the device at first, getting a demo platform working as soon as possible. Then we had to conduct, of course, some coverage analysis, and then run the minimum viable product, as I said earlier. So this was the first year. The second year, of course, once it was clearer on the requirements, we could select a device maker. We could also work a bit more on the behavior of the asset, and this is a critical point. Getting the hardware, getting the device is not easy, of course, but it's also critical to understand how the device will behave in its environment. Remember, it's a fully autonomous device. There is no human interaction. Therefore, you need to cover every potential situations that this device will be in, and the type of information the device should bring back to the platform. And this is quite a big amount of work, and this is why also running such an MVP is critical to really understand the behavior of the device. We also have to go through, of course, an RFQ process, which after led to a secondary test where we implemented a bit more functionalities. We had a better device, and it allowed us also to modify the firmware based on the results of that analysis. And as we are moving forward towards the go live in 2019, we are also densifying the network in the different locations. And this is the result. This is what is really a solution tailored to the business and the operational needs of PSA, and not the other way around. This is the critical aspect. The business requirements, the pain points of the customer should drive the technology, should drive the different components that will be added into the full solution, and not the other way around. And this is why I insist a lot on the design thinking workshop that really enable to generate that first common understanding within PSA, within IBM, within Sigfox, of what were the pain points and what needed to be done potentially to tackle them. And this is how we were able to build this solution. The device was designed and provided by Alps, which is an $8 billion company who is specializing in producing electronics. Today, they produce close to 450 million pieces per month. So we really went out there and chose an expert in electronics who also had experience in the automotive space. Sigfox, of course, in 60 countries, as I said. And we also added a second partner on the location service. So as you all know, Sigfox can provide a native location service. But in this case, one of the requirements from PSA was to have a more precise location service, especially within their factories. And this is where we worked hand in hand with our partner here to provide a location service based on Wi-Fi technology. And of course, IBM, who has worked on the software platform and has also been the project leader and integrator in this adventure. Now let's look at the lesson learned and really what came out of this project. So of course you can imagine that in 18 months there's been a lot of things that came out, but I wanted to share with you a couple aspects, critical aspects that we encountered during the design and the deployment of this solution. First of all, as I was saying earlier, focus on the customer pain points. It's really important to drill down on where your customer is hurting, where you are hurting today, before thinking about this device, this solution, and so on. The pain point will drive the end-to-end solution in order to be successful. And one way of doing this, as shown earlier, is to engage in design thinking workshops, value proposition designs, and so on. There's a lot of different tools out there that can help you really map the customer pain points, your internal pain points, to get a good understanding of how to move forward with an IoT solution. It's also important to get that full picture to get across functional team engagement. In big corporations, not a single person, not a single department has the full picture of what is happening on the field, and that's why it's critical to onboard on all those different departments. And giving people the opportunity to lay down ideas is also an essential aspect. The innovation, it can come from any layers within a company, and giving the opportunity of people that are in the field to share their ideas and how technology could improve the operational aspects can also be very beneficial. And last but not least, it's important to keep in mind that deploying such a digital solution is not just putting a device on the field. It potentially carries a global process of full transformation. The device, the solution will provide you with new insights that will potentially change the way your processes are in place. It will change the way teams works and so on. Teams will need to be trained, they will need to be onboarded. So when deploying an IoT solution, it's also important to look towards the transformative aspects of it. And sketching the user journey, really drilling towards the different stages of that solution in your company will help you to project how far this solution could transform your organization. When looking into the building phase in creating that first MVP, of course, the selection of the device is critical. Going for an off-the-shelf device or looking for a custom device. At the end of the day, it's important to keep in mind the final requirements and the final use case, because upgrading a hardware on the field is difficult, and this is important to keep in mind. The coverage assessment part. The best recommendation here is really to identify the point of interest of your customers. What are the critical points where your customer, where you want to get the information, and go on sites and test the radio performance in situation, attached to a container or not, really to understand the different performances that you might have. Some environments are industrial environments, complex environments, where the radio performance of the device could be impacted. And last but not least, before launching that MVP, agree with all parties on clear metrics. What are the metrics that we will follow? What are the KPIs that will be looked at to define if the project is successful or not? Of course, again, if you have a clear focus on what's the business aspect of the solution, what's the pain point, deriving those KPIs will be easier. And then once the device is on the field, once you're measuring and adjusting your solution to the reality, it's very important to keep in mind the behavior of the device, as I was saying earlier. Allowing for firmware updates on the field is important, because every use case is different, every operational environment is potentially different, and you will need to potentially update your device with new behavior patterns. Looking, of course, at the success rates, your ability to locate, your ability to capture the information, and therefore the availability of the network in real life, in situation, and also identifying potentially where you will need to densify your environment. And then, of course, looking at your ability to generate the insights that you define in the previous phase, and stay focused on the agreed goals. Potentially, the solution will bring up a lot of new ideas, a lot of new type of information. It's important not to get diluted in all the possibilities, and to stay really focused on the KPIs and the core pain points of the customer. And last but not least, govern through all this process. Put in place an organization, a governance structure, where all the parties, all the relevant parties are involved on their core business. Establish also responsibilities between the parties and at different steps of the project, and organize weekly reviews to tackle the issues as they unveil. Like I showed earlier, it all started with a 2 days workshop, but after that it was about a collaboration that lasted through 18 months. Deploying such a solution can take a long time. Doesn't have to be 18 months necessarily, but from experience, from what we've seen in the field, a full scale, a new solution into such complex businesses usually takes at least 10 to 12 months. And that's why it's critical to keep all the involved parties at the table working together towards the success of the solution. And that is it for the presentation of the project. If you have any questions, remarks, please share with us.
Thank you so much, Matthieu. Amazing presentation. I loved it. I understand everything about the case with PSA and IBM. Thank you so much, especially the last parts about what did you learn, build, and all that was very interesting. We have indeed a few questions. The first one is, How did you handle device firmware updates?
That's a tricky question.
It's a good question.
No, it's a good question. In this case, the initial device that we had chosen was off the shelf, which didn't necessarily onboard such protocol. So we had to do it the old-fashioned way. We had to go in the field, plug and make the modifications ourselves. This is really one of the lesson learned from this project, is that the behavior of the device needs to be really tuned to the use case, and one size does not fit all. So it needs to be anticipated and it needs to be taken into account. So if you're doing a project like this, be better than us and anticipate that part.
Thank you. We have another question regarding the device. Is the device available to the market in Zone 2? Precise question.
Okay, so today it will really depend on the use case you are targeting. The device today is available in RC1. It's available in RC1. We are working towards an RC4 and RC2 version. If they're not available as we speak today, they will be very soon.
And as we saw on the map, it's mainly Europe so far. And
for the PSA use case, yes, it is Europe. But yes, one thing I did not mention is that PSA is really looking to spread this use case across the automotive industry. They're looking to make it a bit of a standard, and therefore, if the device is not available in RC2 as we speak, sorry, I don't have the latest updates on me, but it will be very soon.
That shows it's an excellent solution if
you
want to spread it around. Next question: what is expected time frame for roll-up in Europe?
So the rollout has started. It will continue this year, and it will conclude by the end of 2020 or beginning of 21.
Okay, thank you.
We're talking about 6 digits in terms of numbers, so it's quite an impressive rollout.
Great to know. Thank you. Next question: what were the key success factors for the Wi-Fi location?
We may have a lot of very precise questions. The key success factors for the Wi-Fi location. The aspect that PSA wanted to cover was really the ability to know where the container was on their assembly sites. If you look on Google Maps, for example, and you type an assembly site from a random car maker, you will see by the size of it, it's quite a huge piece of land and building. And so one of the aspects one of the motivation, let's say, sorry, to get the Wi-Fi location was really to have that ability to know where the container would be in such a huge site.
So the next question.
The containers like you track your Deliveroo or Uber Eats order. It's a question of requirements and actually what the data is needed for. In this case of PSA, there are readings and sensings that are done by the device. I don't remember the exact number, but there's four to 5 readings that are done per day, and that gives quite good information on the whole fleet status.
Yeah, because most of the time the question we have is that the people think that they need to monitor second by second what's going on with the asset, but actually you want the report at the right time and the right data.
Exactly, and you want to have the alerts in time. In time meaning you don't want to have the alerts after 2 weeks.
Yeah.
But you do not want to track all your containers like you track your Uber Eats order. It's fun to look at for a couple of days, but you will get very bored of it.
Yeah, and this is why actually you monitor alerts and events.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Next question, what is the usage of downlink message of Sigfox in this project?
There is a downlink usage. It will be used to tweak and modify the behavior of the device.
Okay, thank you. So next question. Was the database from here enough? So in this case, here means the partner of the project, of course, for those that don't know the company. And after, if not, but there are access to, let me think. If not, but there are access points available, are you able to add those access points with their location where is base station in some ways? So it's more about the implication of your technology in the solution.
Yeah, no, it's a very pertinent question. So in some cases, it's a very good question. In some cases, the database from here was not sufficient to really provide an accurate location. We are working, as we have a strong partnership with here, to really improve their database and feed in the points that are required by our customers. When it's not possible to actually acquire the MAC addresses, we are also working with customers to set up a private database where the application will have the ability to send requests for specific MAC addresses that are not available in the here database. And we are building this database along with our partners.
Okay, thank you so much. Don't hesitate we have a few questions left. If you have one in mind, please feel free to post it in the question section of the tool. We have another question. How long was the test period, the POC lasted to build the full solution? Because you explained you were like trying it on site. So how long did it take you actually?
So the MVP ran for 6 months.
6 months.
Yeah, 6 months. There was the first MVP, and then afterwards there were additional modifications that were made, as I said, on the behavior of the device.
Okay.
But the initial MVP itself ran for 6 months.
Okay, thank you. And do you have any advice, or if we want to propose our own solution to a big company like PSA or others, if one of the startups that is listening to you today would like to push their solution? I think that's the meaning of the question.
Well, like I said earlier, I strongly believe that the IoT can impact those environments, and that we've demonstrated that it brings real value. But the core focus should really be not on the solution itself, but on the pain points. What are we trying to solve? What's the use case, and what's the operational on the customer, to really understand how is my solution going to fit. Because at the end of the day, after a collaboration of 10 to 12 months, the last thing you want is to come up with a square where your customer needs a round. And this is, I think, in order to avoid that, in order to avoid having a solution that does not fit the operational environment of your customer or the pain points, is really drilling through those at the very beginning. Sitting down with the customers, asking the questions, working with the customer through its organization to really identify the pain points through the different departments, and so on and so on. It's a lot of work. It takes a lot of preparation time. It takes also quite a lot of commitment from the customer side, because it will mean really to drill into their organization, drill into their processes, drill into the costs that they have today. But if you're able to generate that first layer of information on the pain points and the operation environment, this will give you a tremendous advantage when designing your solution, because it will really fit what your customer needs on a day-to-day basis.
And as we saw in this example, Sigfox were not working alone. The project was led by IBM. You had here, Alps, so many people of the ecosystem involved. So you don't have to go there alone. Find a business partner who would love to be one of your project and a solution. So don't hesitate to reach out to Sigfox or other integrators to go through such a project. I think we are at the end of the question, so thank you so much, Matthieu. It was so interesting. I'm sure we're going to have a lot of views on this webinar as it was recorded. And in the follow-up email, I will send you the link to the next webinar. Feel free to join us on Sigfox Builders Slack. If you have any more questions, we will be happy to help you develop your own solution. And see you soon. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.